This is the Canon EOS R7. I think it's the best value in mirrorless cameras. Now let me tell you why. Welcome back to Cameras and Tech. My name is Joe, and if you have a camera gear addiction, well, you've come to the right place. And let me say it's been inspiring to hear from people and find out how many of you are enjoying my videos. Thank you so much for choosing to watch, and please consider joining the community and subscribing. Now on to the rest of the review. Canon has had a sketchy history of releasing cameras that are missing features. The term Canon cripple hammer has been used ad nauseum on the internet. Cameras like the EOS R, R6, R5, and M50 all had issues with missing features or could barely shoot video at their highest codecs. I won't even get into any of the specific problems, but you get the point. Canon basically holds out on us. And you can thank Sony and Fujifilm for pushing the envelope and adding features that Canon seemed to neglect in the past. Better heat management, eliminating record limits, higher shutter frames per second, color space, upgrades, etc., etc. The list goes on. But good news. With the Canon R7, Canon seems to be breaking that trend, putting together a competitive feature package at a sub $2,000 price point. For all of the good things about this camera, price has to be at the very top of the list. For all the features I'm about to list, the price is about $1,499 US. That is by no means cheap, but in the world of full-featured hybrid cameras, that is quite the deal. To put that in perspective, that's about 60% the price of a new Canon R6 Mark II and 42% the price of an R5. If you've watched some of my other reviews, you know how important ergonomics are to me. Canons have always felt great in the hand, and the R7 is no exception. The R7 should be comfortable for small and large hands alike. The overall look of the camera is identical to the R6 except slightly smaller. The button layout is simpler with fewer buttons than its big brothers, and a new dial button combo that sits beside the viewfinder. I find this new button extremely nice to use, very pleasant and tactile to click back and forth. I normally set this dial to control the aperture. I honestly prefer this dial and button layout over the higher end Canon cameras, say the buttons on the C70. I hope that they implement this into some of the future lineup. I don't want to spend too much time on the menus, but after using menu systems from pretty much every major camera brand, Canon is easily my favorite. Sony is a close second after its recent improvements, and Fujifilm is absolutely horrendous and really needs to update their interface. This is obviously subjective though, and with time and practice, I believe all menu systems are usable, with Canon just being the most user-friendly in my opinion. Next is memory and megapixels. The Canon R7 uses affordable UHS 2 SD cards, which is amazing, not just because I had a bunch of them on hand, but they're also super affordable. I can confirm the Lexar UHS 2 V60 cards work perfectly on the R7, and I'll leave a link in the description below to the best deal I've found on them. They're usually between $30 and $40. I own about 4 of them personally to use with my R7 and R6. Also, if you use the affiliate link below, I get a small kickback, so thanks in advance for that. Compared to the crazy prices that go well over $100 for memory these days, this is quite the deal. The megapixel count is 32.5, which is just about right for a sensor this size. It should allow for sharp, clean images when exposed correctly. I'll leave some sample photos below for you to test out for yourself. For me, the video features are the star of the show. The Canon R7 matches my R6 Mark II codec for codec. It's just as capable in a smaller form factor. 4K 60, 120p at full HD, and what Canon calls 4K fine mode. This new fine mode is the absolute highest sharpness achievable with the R7 sensor and oversamples a 7K image. This allows for reframing and ultra sharp video when the situation calls for it. Overheating for this camera is a relative non-factor, as I have recorded well over an hour with 4K footage and 0 warnings. Even at 4K fine mode, it'll allow for up to an hour of continuous recording, and who can forget the major selling point? No record limits. This allows me to continue recording takes and shooting long form content without breaking up my train of thought. There's also 10-bit 422 professional color space to match all of my higher end cameras like the R6 Mark II that I keep mentioning and the Canon C70, as well as C-Log to round out the video features. As I did with the photos, I'll leave a link to some of the sample videos below for you to test out yourself. A brief overview of the photo features is all it takes to show that Canon did not leave consumers wanting. With an eye-popping 30 frames per second electronic shutter to capture fast-moving wildlife and sports, the Canon R7 gives us professional sports camera numbers. The camera also allows for 15 frames per second when you're shooting in RAW and JPEG simultaneously and using a mechanical shutter. The benefits of using a small sensor also is that your telephoto lenses have their focal lengths extended by up to 60%. So your 70mm to 200mm becomes a 112mm to 312mm. That's significant gains, probably replaces a whole nother lens. For most professionals and hobbyists, this camera will check all of the photo boxes. Now on to the few negatives that I found. Being an APS-C size sensor means your low light performance will not be able to compare to a full frame camera like the R6. That's not to say that it's bad, because it's definitely better than I thought it would be in low light. You will also have a noticeable drop off in depth of field compared to a full frame camera as well. The depth of field issue can often be remedied by using primes with lower apertures. For example, the Canon RF 35mm f1.8 or the 50mm 1.8 as well. Speaking of lenses, there are very few APS-C specific RF lenses, only 3 at the time of this posting, but there are plenty of full frame RF lenses that can fill this gap, as well as some third-party prime lenses. If you plan on upgrading one day or own an RF camera like I do, R6, I keep saying it over and over again, this allows you to use your lenses on both cameras. You can also put an RF to EF adapter and use the full range of hundreds of EF lenses as well. Very circumstantial negative points, but worth considering nonetheless. Oh, before I forget, this camera does not like any third-party batteries. I've used the ones that have reviewed really well on places like Amazon, but for some reason I'll get errors when shooting in some of the higher frame rates or some of the higher codecs with video. So just a warning, if you plan on using third-party batteries, this might not be the right camera to use them on. To sum it all up, the Canon R7 is the best deal among mirrorless cameras, punching far above its weight with photo and video features. I would recommend this little powerhouse to almost anyone, and I find it to be just as capable as my higher end cameras. I would say most people's reservations center around the sensor size, but I'll be completely honest with you, at least 90% of the people considering this camera will never fully use a full frame sensor's strengths. I hope you enjoyed my review of the Canon EOS R6. As always, I love hearing from you, so ask the questions in the comments and I'll provide an answer if I have one. Drop a like if you like this video, and please consider subscribing and joining the Cameras and Tech community. I'll see you next time.